Alright, good morning. Morning. Good evening. Good morning.
Morning!
Okay lang ganito or kailangan mong mic? Okay lang. Pati lang tayo eh. Abusin natin agad para hindi ko kailangan mong mic. Good morning. I'll speak about mobile pen testing 101. So paglabas nyo dito, hindi kayo magiging mobile pen tester. Number 1. Huwag kayo mag-assume na paglabas nyo, mobile pen tester na kayo. What I'll cover here would be everything about mobile security assessment. So we're talking about application specific. So we're not going to jailbreak an iPhone, walang 0 day dito. Kasi kung may 0 day dito, no, ibibenta ko na lang yun. I-present sa inyo. So we'll talk about application specific, iOS, Android. We'll look at as well pen testing. So that's the title of the slide. We're going to cover the presentation. We're going to cover techniques to do pen testing. Again, when you go out of this room, you'll have an understanding of how to do mobile pen test. I'm not going to promise that when you go out, you can ask your organization, Sir, boss, ano na akong mag-pen test? Sa yung app, patest ako, bigla ka report 1 week. No? So that's not the objective. So about me, I'm a full-time consultant for Verizon. I do pen test. So anything na pen test, no? Pen test na internet, pen test. So sa pen test, no? I'm also a MSI student sa SANS Tech Institute, no? Technically SANS Manigraph for those who can pay educational companies. No? I'm also part-time lecturer for LaSalle CSB and trainer kahit saan. Kung saan tawagin, kung saan may pera, doon tayo pupunta ako. So, I'm also a member of PH Cyber Unit. So, we're a non-profit group and also actual voice member. Nasama lang ako doon kasi talagang very good yung mga teammates ko. I mean, they just in-invite lang nila ako as of kaibigan na ako. So, also ex-NCERT, no? So, hello, di ba? Alam niyo na bakit, no? Used to be ex-NCERT and ex-RedRock. So, very proud that I've been in those two organizations. No? I wouldn't be here if it weren't for them because wala akong background before and they really helped me. No? So, my manager is here.
Lang shirt ako.
Pressure, katabahan ko rin ako. So, also do masters. I finished my master info second LSU. I teach there, so side plug, my master info second LSU. You can attend. No? You'll have very great instructors there, no? And I also have a few certifications, no? GIAC, CompTIA, OCP, Offensive Security, CASSP. No? We all have that. So disclaimer, opinions expressed here, I've mentioned I've been affiliated with a lot of organizations. No? I don't represent them. I didn't go here to represent any of those. I'm representing Christian Joseph Villapando as myself. No? So ako, if I say something, that's all about from me. No? I'm not saying a stand for my organization or any affiliation I am, or any organization I'm affiliated with. Alright, so outline. No? Our presentation or our times around 1 hour. My plan is to cover 45 minutes of material, then 15 minutes you can ask questions. Okay? Along the way, you can ask questions as well, but my request is just to keep it along our topics. No? So, bawa na sa iOS type, sir, paano yung pag ginagawa sa Android? No? Huwag tayo tumalon, we'll get there. No? So, we'll cover yung topics there. I request that you ask questions na alongside sa topic natin. Then later, dedicated na time, you can ask anything that you want. So, we'll cover mobile security, no? An overview. We'll talk about iOS. Then we'll talk about Android. Then, static analysis, dynamic analysis, and then mobile pen testing 101. Although the title of the slide for the presentation is Mobile Penetration Testing 101, we're going to cover the more specific pen test details at the very end. Main reason why is, technically the case with mobile pen tests is, you can't do a mobile pen test without doing or knowing yung requirements. No, it's not like when you do a web app pen test, no? Basta alam mo mag-click ng features mo kung mag-word, alam mo yung attacks, okay ka na. But in the case here, no, there will be always a time where your pen test report or pen test assessment would include a portion of the static analysis or may application analysis. No? Pinaka-common kasi niyan, dalawang approach lang. If you get a mobile application, you're going to test the actual client-side application, or at least you're going to look at the libraries, what are the versions, is it signed, etc. Then you're going to test the backend API. Usually ganon, no? It's not like, it can happen, of course, it depends on the scope of the engagement, where you'll be asked to, hey, I just want you to test the backend API. Pwede rin yun. Just don't touch our application, don't run it statically, etc. No? But in most cases, you're going to do two things. Okay. So, short background, no? iPhone Titanium, no? iPhone 15 Pro, no? sabi ng kaibigan ko kagabi, no, habang kinakarap ko yung slides, sisira at nabibend daw siya ni Jerry Rig everything. So, with mobile today, there's technically a blurred line, no, of between computing devices. If you look at iPhones today, like for example, their most recent chip, I think it's V17, it's much more faster than computers or laptops that you have a few years ago. When you look at the power that it can do, at your mobile device, the expense is very expensive money, no? But it's very powerful. At the same time, as an individual, if you're bringing out your phone, question ko sa inyo, if you go out, you leave your wallet, and you suddenly forgot about your wallet and your phone, anong babalikan mo? Phone. Because you can technically, you can't Facebook on your wallet, di ba? You can Facebook on your phone, at the same time, you can pay via your phone. Which is technically, your mobile phone brings much more value. Now, for the enterprise naman, no, there are also as well company-issued mobile devices. So probably some of you, when you join, you get your mobile phone, you got issued unlimited data anywhere. No? So, pwede rin na reimburse, no? But that's a different case. Now, in some cases, mobile devices are BYOD organizations. No? In some organizations I've been with, no, you can't just connect your personal device to their enterprise network. I mean, that makes sense, di ba? Hindi ka nila pinagdadamutan, no? It's just that it's a risk they don't want to take. Now, when we look at operating systems sa mobile, a few years back, no, maraming players. But today, just look at it, it's basically iOS and Android. You may say na, okay, naka-Sony ako, tawag, whatever you want to call the OS ng Sony, whatever you want to call the OS of Samsung, at the end of the day, it's still the base open source Android project. No, nilagyan lang, they just added factors onto it. No, so here's a slide, no, just to look really smart. No, you have to have graphs. No. I have graphs here, no, in terms of mobile operating system here. You look at the blue graph, no, it's mostly Android. Sir, is it like in the US, most of are using iOS because pressure? No, I mean, if you're watching US TV shows, have you seen a teenager with an Android? No, you usually don't because there's no iMessage, there's no blue bubble, diba? If you look at here, most of the OS that's being used by end users is still Android. Why? Because if you sum up Huawei, you sum up Samsung, sum up all of the other operating systems, technically, mas marami pa rin ang Android. So that's just a look, no, on how other operating systems technically just went down the drain after a few years. Now, mobile application functions, no, I'm not sure whatever you use here, no, in the applications here, but technically, you can use it for online banking, shopping, social networking. No? I hope you just use 2 out of the 3 there. No? Streaming, no? Instant messaging. Technically, anything that you can do with your PC now, it's just always possible with your mobile application. Now, here's a graph. No? If you realize, most of the applications I've shown earlier, you're going to subscribe in one way or another. Diba? You can't just buy Netflix na, okay, I watch 5 movies, 25 pesos. No, you can't. You're going to pay $149 if it's like their new model, or $549 if you're doing family na premium for a month, and then you only watch. No? You lose your productivity, you just watch all day. Technically, how applications are being used now are subscriptions. So the reason why it's important to understand this is because this is how applications are now set or configured to work in our mobile devices. Ibig sabihin, if there's a subscription basis, your streaming is constantly communicating to that service backend server. So you have to understand. Now, mobile threats, no, that actually matter. Sir, does it really matter if I get a jailbroken phone, someone hacked my phone, sends me an email? Yes, it can happen, but in most cases, no, we'll look at the next slide. This can happen, but I would say not so much. You look at, for example, loss of control and visibility with BYOD. That's not really your like individual problem, but more of like an organizational problem. So if you're managing devices as an organization, this is going to be a problem. If you're an end user, you don't really care about this. First bullet. Second, always on devices through multiple interfaces. So if you, for example, if you buy a MacBook, did you know that the Bluetooth is enabled by default? It's not because Apple is insecure, or Apple is it's not really doing a good job in security. It's because they just want users, when they buy their devices, it works off the bat. Diba? Pagkabili ko, okay, kailangan kong sabi nila pag naka-airpods ako, it will move to Mac, it will move to my iPhone, then I have to enable Bluetooth by default. Device patching and extended vulnerability period. So we're going to look at Android later. Why iOS would always say, users, pag nalagyan ng keynote ni anyone, Cook, when you watch your keynote, it's always going to say na, users will get this update by the end of the month. Have you heard that from Samsung? No. You're going to hear that from Google because Google technically is the closest to the pure Android experience. Yung Google Pixel line. No? It was Nexus before. But with other OS or other mobile operation, not really, more like manufacturers, you don't always get the updates timely. Now, the fourth bullet is really about device theft and loss. Now, this is a big problem for really, we're looking at security. Because when you lose a device and it's unlocked, technically, a huge portion of the protection is gone already. Someone can just browse through it. Of course, if you open an app and then you enable biometrics again, you would have to authenticate Face ID or PIN, which is another protection. But what if the app doesn't have that? If your phone is unlocked, like for example, if your phone is unlocked, you open Facebook, you already see your feed, right? There are applications where you have to authenticate again. So sample would be a banking app. No? You'd have to authenticate. Weak server-side control is very common because most of the applications I've seen, mobile applications, they are like supporting the main web application. So if you're supporting the main web application, there's a push that we need to have that mobile app because our users are finding it difficult to use our online platform. Sample would be, I would say again, I'm a user. For example, Manulife. Manulife has been very long time using only web. But recently, I received an email a week ago, they're not pushing a mobile app for their users. No. What I'm saying is that they probably took their time to set it up. But again, because they're considering the exposure to weak server-side controls. Now, application flaws as well are very important. No, flaws would be inherent to the application or to the mobile platform in itself, or even from ad libraries or third-party libraries. Now, stolen device threat, when I was trying to finalize this, I looked earlier in the morning. I go, post snatcher. So this is a video that a screenshot I got. No, they technically took the phone of one of the person here, I think in jeepney, sitting in front. That's why you don't text when it's traffic and you're near the window. No, that's Filipino basic 101. No, you don't text. So mobile devices can be lost or stolen. Now, these devices would introduce a threat to an organization. Why though? Because if you're using your mobile device and it's storing organizational information, no, and someone like a threat actor steals it, they're going to have access to organizational data, right? So it's going to be a problem. Now, what can an attacker do if your device is unlocked? Many things, right? Pretty simple. They can access local resources, extract data, they can sync the device to backup. Backup is very important. I mean, very important for us, but also valuable to an attacker. Because if they can get a backup, technically they have all the data or they would want. Now, jailbreak, root or unlock, they can proceed with it, but of course, not that straightforward. Now, with opportunities in mobile security, I just want to cover this very quickly. The reason why mobile pen testing is quite new is because the most common pen testing are like web and network. Everyone wants to go web. When they're doing bug bounty, they're all like flying cross-site scripting, they find all the bypasses, it never ends. When you do mobile, you're going to do red teaming. You're going to look at Kerberos, constraint delegation, constraint delegation. All of those things, you're going to be good at network pen testing. But when it comes to mobile, I would say another portion is that the demand is not really that high. At least in the context I've been on. I mean, you always get a web application that may partnership on mobile. But in some cases, you won't have. Always web. So, huge portion of the assessments are just really web. No. Now, this presents a gap in mobile security. Because if you're going to learn mobile security, you have to understand, as any security practice that you want to do, the fundamentals. It's just sometimes too much. Right? For example, if you look at iOS, you want to understand how it loads from the very start. You're going to have a bad time because there's so much memory protection, may KSLR, in Tagal, mababaliw ka. No? You're looking at security yet, no? You can't keep up already. So at least that's how I feel. No, same with Android, still pretty complicated, but it's quite difficult. However, that's an opportunity. If you look at, for example, cloud, 2 years ago. If you look at cloud, or maybe 5 years ago, I would say. If you look at cloud 5 years ago, it's pretty new, but no one's really touching are scratching the surface of its security vulnerabilities. And today, even up to today, we're seeing a lot of vulnerabilities in cloud. Now, anong bago ngayon? What's new? AI. Right? For example, if you want to look at a research or research field, I recommend starting with AI. Because I was able to talk with one of these speakers this morning from Protect AI. He said that there's a lot of vulnerabilities in AI and no one's really, there's the barrier of entry is technically none. That's what he said. So if you're looking for opportunities, it's good to be proficient in AD pen test, for example, but come on, like maybe half of you here are proficient in doing that. So there's opportunities in mobile security. Now, I forgot to start. How many here are pen testers? I forgot to ask from the very start. Pen testers. You do pen tests. Raise your hand. Yeah. So, most of you ayaw mamin. You want to share. Come on, it's 2023. We can share that what we do. No, we're not like criminals. Hopefully. So, how about blue team professionals here? Soft work, or incident response, help desk, anything like that. None? What are you doing then? Parang nasa audit kayo, you're in the wrong room. I'm just kidding. I want to understand because I could have asked this before, so that I can level the talk. Para kasi I'm seeking a lot of terms na. Does that make sense? It should be, the presentation should be for you, not for me to give a lot of terms. Now we're going to look at another concept, mobile malware. Mobile malware, we're all aware, malware is technically malicious software. Mobile malware is a growing threat for devices. Though I would really say, in most cases, TLDR, if you just update your phone, you make sure you don't download from APK mirrors, you don't download premium crack. Come on, you just pay 200 pesos for God's sake, di ba? Huwag nyo sayang. Don't trade in your data for that very small cash because it's a good opportunity for attackers to get malware in your devices. They would most likely send it over email because email protections would be factored. But if they can just trick you or you voluntarily download from third-party locations, then there's a risk. Now, it's a small fraction of the overall malware threat. For example, if you look at the news today, mostly are targeting Windows OS, because 90 to 95% are really Windows operating systems. So is that because Windows is much more less secure? When you talk after sermon, what OS will you pick? That would usually happen. What is the most or more secure OS? There's not really, but it just so happened that most of the malware develops for Windows because high chances of winning. Are you going to develop malware for, let's say, BlackBerry? Or are you going to target the 90-year-old guy who doesn't have internet in his phone? It won't work. So that's why mobile malware is not really that big of a threat, but it's still there. Delivery methods may vary. We're going to look at later iOS, why it's so much secure, and why iOS is preferred by other security professionals. Not all, of course. And we're also going to look at Android, why that's the case. Delivery methods for iOS, official app store, there's a blue box with the tool thing. Third-party app store for jailbroken devices. So for example, Cydia and all of those things. Of Android, you have another option, not really another, you have 3 more. You can use third-party app store if you want to pay that license. You can go to malicious websites or even direct victim targets. That's for conducting an attack. Now, Pegasus spyware. Who has ever heard of this? This is not the Pegasus you know. No, this is different. It's a spyware, guys. It's not the QC. So, anyone's ever heard of Pegasus spyware? NSO group. Wala? Okay. So, Pegasus spyware, very common. I shouldn't poke that. Mawaling camera. Pegasus spyware, it's been developed by NSO. They're an Israeli-based group. And they're technically selling the malware, or the spyware, to, let's just say, big organizations. We're talking about big organizations that can stop not organizations, big nation states that can stop another nation state from developing nuclear. It's just that they're that big. They're using it mainly to target key government personnel. They're using it to target journalists who are, of course, trying to cover or not be exposed. No? And with the Pegasus spyware, it's usually able to bypass or initiate multiple chained exploits that could lead to even sometimes zero click. Kapag sabi natin when say zero click, technically if you just receive the message, without to do anything, you'll be impacted or exploited. So it's not that bad. It's that bad. No? What it does is going to look at your contacts, going to look at your location, SMS, email. Typical malware, the difference though is you don't have to go through the clickety, like you have to accept or download. Secondly, if you just send a user a message, for example, they can be impacted. Now the case here though is why it's really impactful is it even affects iOS. Now if you remember Android, you can download malicious applications by third-party sites, right? In iOS, that's impossible. You can't, unless you're using a jailbroken phone, you can upload, but if you're not using a jailbroken phone, you have to go through the official app store. Now imagine being able to deliver malware and actually execute malware without having to upload an application. That's a big deal. That's why it's quite pricey. Don't worry, I don't know the pricing as well. But what's fun here is that very recent, around September, first week, there was a new, they saw, the group was, I forgot their name, Citizen Lab, they looked at that there's another campaign using the Pegasus spyware, and it affects iOS 16.6. So if you watch the Apple keynote, the most recent version is iOS 17. Then they released another software update, I think so 17.1 siya today. But in 16.6 is impacted. So if you haven't updated your iOS 17, maybe for your iOS version for quite some time, you might be impacted with this one. But again, risk management, you ask yourself, big time ka ba? Sisenta ka ba nito? Pero I'm just saying, it's there. I mean, if you think you're a main character in your world, then maybe you can send one. But for me, I'm pretty sure I won't. So, triple threat. This is the news about it. It's around April. iOS 15.16 zero-click exploits. Now, my suggestion to you is don't look into the exploit and try to learn it, because it will take years. When I took a class about mobile pentesting, the instructor said, if you want to get into iOS exploitation today, you're pretty late. Because those who are doing iOS exploitation can even exploit today. So if you're going to go through all of the hoops, kabulin mo pa, I don't recommend. You just do Nmap, mag-Nmap na lang tayo. It's so much simpler, Metasploit. So difference with both, difference between the two, Android and iOS. Android is used by most people, iOS is used by most people. The difference though is just technically how can you deliver malware or where's malware coming from. We're also going to look at, there's a lot of intricacies here, how iOS do secure boot, how Android does booting, but we can't cover all of that. I'm not really an expert in this one and we only have a few hours to talk. But the main difference is the reason why there's much less exploitation on iOS because there's a very strict vetting process before an application can be deployed over the App Store. As I've said, it's impossible to deliver an application in iOS by asking them to download an IPA over some website. It won't happen. Okay? So, unlocking root in jailbreaking. Who was here have rooted or jailbroken the device? Jailbroken, sorry. Okay, meron? Who did? Sino nagpa-jailbreak sa Gilligan's? Wala ko namin. Come on. So, jailbreaking technically is the term for unlocking iOS. Rooting is technically the term for unlocking Android. Basically the same thing, same concept, different a lot of very huge different process. But you get the point. Mobile devices will be shipped with restrictions. If you actually look at EULA, End User License Agreement on iOS, you are forbidden to do reverse engineering for several reasons. That's why people would like to jailbreak. Me, I used to have an iPod Touch, and I remember if you know yung icon na parang box na open, that's technically CD, where you can install applications for free because you have a jailbroken device. However, if you jailbreak or root your device, what do you avoid? You're avoiding the warranty. It's technically like buying a TV, kinumpunin mo mag-isa, you change some parts, you get some parts from the nearby hardware store, you change it. Technically, you avoided the warranty. Now, we're going to look at iOS. iOS, very famous OS app or operating system application. Most recent is 17, no? As you pictures, yung mga pwede kayo mag-share ng contact mo, you just put the phone together. No? It doesn't work, by the way, at least when I tried. No? But I hope it works for you. No, so it didn't work. Now, you'll also be able to put, I'm an Apple fanboy. You'll also be able to put a photo so that when you call a person, you're going to see that, oh, that's the photo of this person. Very simple stuff, but tingin ng mga Apple fanboy, wow! I mean, crazy. I mean, what does Apple did to, done to us now? So restrictive, but works very well, with the Apple ecosystem. When I knew of this before and I wasn't using Apple, I said this is utter BS. No? But why are you restricting your users? But when you get to the point that when you put in your AirPods, you listen to your phone, and then when someone calls you over FaceTime, it shifts there without clicking that Bluetooth lipat ka. You'll be amazed, no? You'll be amazed, no? So when someone calls you over the phone, it rings in your watch, and when you talk to your watch, the microphone is actually good. No? You don't like, alam ko to sumasagot. It's answering via the phone, but you won't realize if you're the other person on the other side. No? But with iOS itself, no, a good thing to remember is it supports even the most oldest phones. iPhone 10R XR. You remember that? How many years that it was already? It's still supported by iOS 17. So supports a lot of phones. No, very very. Problem though, it has a very restrictive setup. And the reason why it's possible is because Apple controls hardware and software. That means Apple develops the hardware, Apple develops the software. It's closely knit, tightly knit, K-N-I-T. That's why optimization is really good. No, with Android, that's not really the case. So jailbreaking iOS, advice ko sa inyo, don't jailbreak your work phone, number one. You're going to get in jail. Number two, you can't do it. Kasi the jailbreaks at work today, I think, partially would be iOS 15. We're on 17 now, and there's no stable jailbreak for iOS 15. So it's quite going to be difficult. Now, so reason why we want to jailbreak a phone though is we want unrestricted access. Because if we're going to test the phone and we have limited features or permissions, it's going to be a difficult time. So no iOS jailbreaks, you have checkmate, checkra, and cover. We won't go through all of the details because it's technically quite difficult to explain for an hour talk. But here are some of the most common iOS jailbreaks. iOS applications. How our applications work? Technically, iOS applications are deployed by IPA. Technically, the package ng IPA. Second is zip file, same lang naman ang Android. And applications can be written in C, Objective-C, or Swift. Okay, so you can write applications in C, Objective-C, or Swift. Of course, you write applications in C, you like to walk a dangerous life. So it's going to be much more harder, but you have much more control. However, the preferred way to do this is really with Swift now. But the problem with Swift is it's quite new. When I say quite new, not like 2 years ago, but I don't think it has reached 10 years. So if you're looking at a programming application or programming language that's not mature, maybe it's not an option for you. But Swift is the preferred way. Now, when you're dealing with iOS applications, have you ever seen, for example, you click a link, t.me, telegram.me. When you click on the link, it opens your Telegram app. Here's the reason why. You can actually set entitlements within your application. That, for example, where your application sees a link, it would open that attributed application so that it would run or open that page within your application. So, for example, you want to call someone or you open your contacts, then call. It's technically going to do a phone :/ at the back end, and then trigger your phone or phone app, and then going to initiate. Now, universal links, were the answer, in the case, now what if the device does not have that application installed? Now you have t.me, for example, or tg.this. This is for Telegram. Both of these are for Telegram. If you click this link over a browser, your iOS device, if you have Telegram installed, it will ask you, do you want to open this in Telegram? No, yes. I think you've seen that before. Like, for example, you open a web browser, you go to Twitter, then you have Twitter installed. When you open that, it won't really go through the web browser, but it will open your mobile application. Now, universal links are really like the generic approach if you don't have that application installed. You define this in the entitlements file, and then under the key, this one. If you, for example, visit, for each website to be mapped to that specific application, they have to define a file called Apple App Site Association. This is located under, I forgot the directory, but it's a hidden directory / that something. I forgot, but this is the file. If you're doing web app pen test, this is seen by word. Sino napansin nila? I mean, weird file or interesting file. Ito yung file na yun, yung Apple App Site Association. So just look into custom URL handlers, universal links. So these are like ways we interact with applications. Now, code signing with iOS. With iOS code signing, it requires that all executed code is signed using an Apple-issued certificate. Before you get an Apple-issued certificate, you have to go through the strict and secretive process, vetting process ng Apple. That's why you can't just download an application and then run it. It's not going to happen because from the booting itself, it's not signed by Apple certificate straight over. If developers would want to create, they have to join the Apple developer program, and the certificate will be issued to them. Now, developers would create their applications via Xcode, ID, signed with the certificate, and submit it for publication to the App Store. So when an application, you have to sign up for the developer program, you write it, you submit it to Apple, then they're going to review your application if it's actually good or not. Then, and only then, Apple will sign it with their private key. Then it will be available over the App Store. So any application that is installed, or for example, are able to deliver to a person, if it's not signed with the private key of Apple, it won't work. So technically, it's impossible to run an application in a non-jailed or jailed device. Ibig sabihin yung non-jailed device. Security features na Apple, a lot. iOS, really, ATS, pinaka-common since iOS 9. It forces users forces the applications to communicate only over HTTPS. Parang TLS1 V2 yung requirement. So you can change this in the playlist file, I think, but you have to, but by default, it sets what's needed. Even ciphers are defined here of what can be used to communicate over HTTPS. This one is new as well in privacy controls, yung ASCAP not to track, which triggered Facebook. How's Facebook going to earn money if you're not allowing trackers? So testing environment ng Apple. You have two options. Either you get a jailbroken old device, you get an old device, so then you jailbreak it, then you have a test device. Or you sign up with Corellium. Corellium is pretty expensive. I don't know the pricing, but it's still limited. But again, you have a virtual device. You can also run an iOS simulator, but quite limited, for Apple Security Research Program, which you won't be a part of if you're not doing security research for Apple. So technically your main option is you get an old device, you jailbreak, and you work on it. Okay? So some consideration when you're going to pick a platform, one is pricing. Of course, if you can get a very cheap old iPhone, maybe like iPhone 11, that's much more better. Rather than sign up with Corellium, it's not really a physical device. Iba yung experience, so you just can click on an app, you can just scroll, much more difficult. Speed as well would be considered, ease of routing, restoration, all of these things that you have to consider when you want to set up your testing environment. Of course, if you're going to test, you're not going to test with just a phone. You have to have another operating system or virtual machine. Sir, pwede din kali Linux, yes. Linux, Ubuntu, yes, would will work. It doesn't really matter as long as you can communicate with the device. You should be okay. Now, that's with iOS, very simple. With Android, we're just going to look at how Android works. So, Android started really with the Open Handset Alliance. It's a project by Google. So if you're wondering why is Android green, why is Google green, here's the answer. Technically, Android was from Google. It was funded by Google around 2004, if I remember correctly. So Android is technically the base OS. What other manufacturers or companies do is that they put their OS, their support, applications. Technically, you ask Samsung, di ba? Binawasan nila yung bloat nila. But technically, they just add applications to fit their mobile device. So you have a base OS, that's Android. That's why everything, if you look at Samsung, Huawei, Nothing Phone, OnePlus, technically they're all Android because they're using the base Android OS. Now, Android applications are packaged or called in APK. You can develop this into, you can create applications using two languages, mainly Java and Kotlin. APK is what we call technically a Android package. As Oprah said, everything in zip files. Even APKs are technically zip compressed files. So here's some details of how it works. Now we can really cover how bytecode is executed, pag Android 5.0, anong gamit na runtime. You can really just cover that. But I want to highlight is each application though is assigned a unique UI, PGI. So for example, you see a movie, see a Hollywood or someone TV Patrol or IDX says that. If the application is downloaded, it can hack all the mobile device. That's actually true. It can happen, but most of the cases not, because each application is assigned a unique UID. Technically, it's quote-unquote sandbox within its own. It's its own allocation, dun siya pwede mag-write. You can't just really overwrite. But of course, if you root the device, then you have free for it. I'm sorry. So Android application signing, is it as strict as iOS? No. Definitely no. Developers sign their own applications. So if you want to be able to deploy an application with Android, it's quite straightforward. And signing does not validate the identity of the developer. That's not really the goal of Android. Their goal, that's why signing is there, so that when another application is installed and it uses the same certificate, it has the permission to technically override it. As sabi, certificates are used to prevent overwriting prior applications and allow updates to be issued to an application. So it's really more of like not being able to delete another application if you install a malicious one. So not really of the verifying portion. If you just look at very simplistically, the way Android applications can be written and deployed in Play Store is really, and then will work on the device, it's much more simpler than with iOS. Now, Android security fix process. Now, this is not applicable with iOS. Why though? Because iOS controls or Apple controls hardware and software. The case though, if with Android you have a base OS, then you're going to ship it to other manufacturers. They're going to add their their applications. Then they're going to check if that works for them. And if it works for them, there's another check. They have to send it to their mobile operators. Heard of, for example, Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, or Globe Smart. When they add their own application on your device because you're in postpaid, they have to check that as well if it works for them. So then, that's only when the patch will be released or technically will be functional. So just to go through this, now you have a flow, for example, disclosed. Now that flow, a fix would be made for that flow, and then Google would pass it on to the vendors. Hey, this is the fix. Will this work for you? You check the vendors after a few weeks back. Okay, that works for me. Or that doesn't work for me. So I can process. Then when everything's okay, you have to fix and update, and then you have to share with the mobile operators. By the way, iOS does not allow mobile operators to add applications. Ibig sabihin, if you buy a postpaid na, at least for the US case, they can install applications of their own. For example, like Smart would install an application. It won't work for iOS. Now, if testing and integration is okay, it can now be shared to the Android users. That's why there's a longer process compared to how iOS can push security updates. It's technically because of these reasons. Now, it's just technically like catering to a lot of vendors, and you have to please them all. Then saka lang mapag-push ng final update. So technically it takes time, Some things takes time, but sometimes you never get what you are waiting for. Like for example, other Android apps or devices, the recent Android never arrived in their OS. Now, how can you interact with a mobile application na Android? A lot of commands, but the most common one is through the Android debug bridge, ADB. Very simple, straightforward to enable. You just have to enable this on your phone. Developer options would vary really on your Android device. Over USB or over wireless would work. Then you just run this command. So very simple. It's like running a bash, like running a command over bash. So like for example, bash UMI. You just add ADB. If you're not in an interactive shell. what happens here, for example, if you're on TDP Connect, you're going to technically connect to your mobile device. By default, it listens on port TCP port 5555. No? Most likely you can change it, but I'll change it anyway. Then you have to just provide the IP. No? You can run ADD as root, ADD as not root. You can list all of the devices that you've been connected. You are connected to now via ADB devices. You can actually push files as well. No? From local to remote. So think of this as like SCP or secure copy, where you can just push files and just even download files. You can even land an interactive shell. A new shell would lead you to the actual shell of the Android application. No? So these are like not really commands that would after this you would be able to do pen testing, but really more being familiar with how you can interact with an Android device. So rooting Android isn't really that difficult today. Quite more possible than iOS. No? Unlike iOS, where you really have to find a stable jailbreak and then, of course, use or start with a device that's old iOS version. Several ways, no? You can unlock the bootloader if you have a physical device, no? Much more easier. Or even exploitation could work. But technically, no, if you can just, it's much more simpler than doing iOS jailbreak. Okay? Or rooting, by the way. Testing environment, pretty the same. You can use Android Studio, it's free. You can create a mobile or Android device there, then you can work from there. You can use Corellium as well, or even Genymotion. Whatever you want, no? It's not really, or even an actual physical device. Host systems you will need, of course, then a virtual machine installed in that host system. Then the considerations before about pricing, how will you do restoring, speed, is of course still applicable here. So now going with testing, 15 minutes. So, mobile app testing. Usually, I'm just going to summarize all of these slides, but there are two approaches. I can do static or dynamic. With static, it's pretty straightforward. You're going to look at the code, find interesting functions, interesting calls. Ideally, you don't scroll the source code until you reach the 2,500 line. You don't do that. What you do is you search, or use search functions, like for example, grep. Or use your IDE. May search function to. It's very pretty simple. Control F all the way. What you're going to do is you're going to look at interesting functions. Exec, maybe there's what code handles login? What code handles logout? How is the change password functionality? A new flow, how does it work? That's what you're going to look at static. Now with dynamic naman, what you're really going to do is test the application while it's actually running. Not in a static way. Now, mobile app pen testing, mobile app security review, somehow similar, really from my experience. But would really vary depending on the objective of your customer or your client. Now, what do they want? Do they want to test the backend server? Then most likely, that's what you're going to focus on. So, used in two contexts, usually you'll be able to test a nearly finished or production ready or an application already in production. That's what's usually going to be the case in any application security assessment. So testing approaches, we have to go through this, just for everyone. You can do black box, white box, gray box. The most common is gray box. Because, sir, I want black box because that's what the attacker really sees, no information. Are you really sure that your PC in HR is not compromised? So they already have initial access. So if you want to spend your 5 days doing initial access, as sir mentioned, one I've mentioned before, you can do that, But again, there are just some organizations or applications hard on the outside, but soft and mushy on the inside. So, most common is gray box testing. Now, static analysis, a lot of terms here. Don't worry, the slides will be posted, by the way. So, the reason why I have a lot of things is so that you can understand the context of the points. Okay? You just go and read through that, but I've explained this portion earlier. So static analysis, what you're going to do is run scans. Going to look at the source code and then check for bad or misconfigured or interesting functions. In most cases, with static analysis, there would be a form of automatic scanning to catch the low-hanging fruit. In my experience, most of them are false positives. Right? If someone tells you, okay, you can secure your application just by our tool, I'm very sorry, but that's not true. You have to manually check it. Sometimes tools would flag Passwords in plain text. When you look at the code, it's technically a comment with the word password. Now, if you don't read that and you print your report, you submit, and then you have coffee, when you go back, I mean, that's not really a good thing to do. So manual code review, technically just use search or grep. You unpack the application, you look at the source code, and review it. The problem though here is if you don't understand code, it's very difficult to do this. You're going to be much more slower. It's going to be tedious, confusing, time-consuming. You don't know what you're doing. The reason why static analysis is very powerful as well is because it requires a high barrier of skill. I mean, not really high barrier. You can do it even if you can't aid. Of course, everyone starts somewhere, but it's really difficult compared to just doing dynamic. So what you'll do is look for certain APIs, keywords, and then find. Of course, understand the flow. No, doesn't mean that you see an exec there, and there's no way for user input to get there. That's not really going to be an issue. No. You have to contextualize as well and look at how the application is working. So you can use tools, but your mileage may vary. Again, really depends on the tool that you use. No, I'm not sure what's the best tool, quote unquote, in terms of less false positives, but just be aware that false positives are. So how can you avoid, when you're using, how can you avoid false positives in automated scanning tools? Well, catch here, I mean not really the catch, the point here is just, if you're running a tool, it has technically no context of your application. It will do its best to understand the calls, see functions, etc., but it can only go so far. Like for example, you see an automated pen test, diba? It's not really that valuable versus a manual one. Someone who can do it with the manual skill. Because for example, it sees two vulnerabilities, two vulnerable portions of the code. It will flag them as two individual issues. But if you have a skilled tester, they may be able to have an idea or way to chain those two exploits to have a higher impact vulnerability. Their automated tool can see that because it lacks the context, doesn't really understand the business risk of the application, what is the exposure of this app. Is this an internal app? Is this an external app? The automated scanning, machine learning, whatever, can think of that, at least now. No. So, dynamic analysis, the focus is real-time testing during real-time execution. What you usually do is to check for security mechanisms, like for example, that disclose data in transit, authorization issues. You can start with MobSF now. Technically, this is not really, it supports only for Android, and it's quite heavy to set up. If you're going to use MobSF, just for initial checks, and it's even 30% false positive. I mean, 30% true positive. Most of it are really false positive. The best way to do dynamic analysis is Frida. No, Frida is king. I'm not an expert in Frida. I just learned it just within this year. But if you look at Frida, it's a dynamic instrumentation library that allows you to interact with the application and its memory in real time. That means if you're trying to unlock a phone or you have an application, for example, that requires a PIN for it to unlock all of the features, you can hook that application and then actually see, what is the comparison or what is the secret key it's using. You can even patch it in such a way that rather than doing the comparison, you just make it, you just technically patch it so that it doesn't do the compare and do the result one. You can do that with Frida. But again, with Frida, it's quite difficult. When I try to learn this, it's like a whole new world for me. It's very difficult. But there's a lot of resources. It's technically, you have no choice. If you want to be really good at dynamic analysis, you have to learn this. What it does is it injects a V8 JavaScript engine or a quick JS process. Then you'll be able to execute, because you have a runtime execution there, you'll be able to execute, look at the classes, memory, what's running in that application. So setting up Frida, the best would be to use it in a jailbroken device. Now, Frida, why Frida is really good is you can use it even if you're using a jail device. Jail device means not jailbroken. But you have to install two agents, at least. One would be for Android, it's a shared object ISO. Then dynamic library for iOS. What happens here is that you will only be able to inject on that current process and then the current privilege of that process. No? Unlike if it's a jailbroken device, the technical full control. So there's still limitation, but at least you can start with somewhere. Right, so takeaways from this portion of the slide. No? Static analysis, you can use tools, but be aware that most of it are false positive. No? I'm not saying that 100% is bad, false positive. You will still find something there. No? It either will be a very low severity finding or a starting point for you to do much more manual. No? You can use grep or search. But dynamic, for example, Frida would be really a good thing to do. Right? So that's with actually interacting with the application itself, not with the backend. So before we go to the backend, I want to introduce you MASVS. OWASP MASVS is a project by OWASP. No? By the way, OWASP means the worldwide applications, that web application. Under the project, no? And they have developed best practices and control groups that covers areas ng mobile application. Merong storage, crypto, auth, network, platform, code, and resilience. And tests are associated with 3 levels, L1, L2, and LR. What it does here, pag level R, is that, start with level 1, all applications should have this. That's your level 1. Yung level 2 checks, if you're a sensitive app, you're holding health information, you're holding banking information, you'll have this. If you're using level R, it most likely be a game, you don't want your game to be reverse engineered, be able to be a user be able to cheat, no? That's what test for LR is what really is applicable. So here's a sample, MASVA storage, no? They've fixed this, they very recently lang, no? They kind of like arranged how it looked like. The goal here is that the app should securely store sensitive data. What do you check? No? You test for local storage, test for device access security policy, and test local data storage. That's actually an Excel file. If you click on that item, it will redirect you to the much more technical view. Then you look at here, it's L1, L2, and R. Paano basahin? How do you read this well? Ito una, it's applicable to L1 and L2 control. This one's applicable only for L2 control. So if you just want to do L1, you can skip this. Right? But if you want to, for example, cover L2, then basically you have to cover L1. Okay? So that's with data storage. Another is with platform, no? That's able to cover all. But my sample here would be auto-generated screenshots, no? For sensitive information. It should be in L2. Have you ever seen this in your phone when you do this like task switcher? No? This is mine, no? For example, Apple Music, look at here, and then this one's a Citibank app. No? If you look at here, if you do this, you can still see the contents of that application, even in task switcher. No? I've learned this from my friends. That if you don't want to get notified, if you don't want to notify the group chat, you do this, you take a screenshot. Then you can see the chat. No? So, as you see here, Apple Music is not protected because there's no reason to do so. With Telegram as well, but with the banking application, even if you're logged in, what you just see is just a plain logo. Okay, so now, mobile pen testing. Did you know that when you do mobile pen testing, it's the 18th control in the CIS version A? So if you want to start into security, I want to secure my organization, I want to do a pen test, then make sure you do 18, 17, 16, pabaliktad mo gawin. Ha? Kasi pang 18 ang pen test. If you want to do pen testing, you have to cover controls 1 ideally and start from there. No? I know pen test is quite cheaper than other services. But it does help, no? But if you're really like from zero, I just want everyone to know that pen testing is the 18th check. No? At least for the standards ng CIS. Does it mean that last mo siyang gagawin? But I'm just trying to say that it's usually not at the very front. No? Okay, so it's actually the 18th portion as a proof. No? Now with mobile pen testing, this will be the last section of this presentation. It's similar to typical pen testing, but there's just like additional things that you have to check, and then there's technically no post-exploitation. In most cases. What you're usually going to do is look at how the application stores data, how does it communicate with the backend server, is the application protected from fairly simple reverse engineering, does it keep secrets statically? That's what you're going to do. No, you're not going to hack the application, then jump to the OS. Technically that's not true because most likely you've jailbroken the device already. So root ka na dun, di ba? That's not really the objective. So So what you usually do is preparation, intelligence gathering, you map the application, exploitation, and of course, everyone's favorite part, reporting. So what do you actually test in a mobile pen test? Well, you have to consider, is that phone really from the organization? If it's a BYD device, technically it's out of scope, diba? I mean, it's like you test your employee's personal laptop. You don't, diba? So that's going to be a problem. No? So in most cases, experience, what will happen is they'll give you the application, you install it on your own, then you have full control, that's your phone, you test from there. You won't be phishing a user, they're going to click on their device, then you test from there. No? It's not a phishing campaign, no? It's not an initial access activity. So what they usually do is that you test the client side, or technically the application itself. Then you test the backend server. You look at the communication, then it becomes web app pen test-ish, or API pen test-ish. The problem though is, if you want to do web app pen test, you want to proxy, what do? You use what tool? Either Burp or Zap, diba? You need to have an HTTP proxy. The case with mobile is it's not that straightforward where you just install the certificate, then you're good to go, no? And then when it's not working, you forgot na naka-intercept is mo. So, pen testers dito, ay umamin. So, similar to web app pen testing. With mobile traffic, that's technically what we're going to do. We want to intercept the TLS traffic. Now, for the device to accept the certificate, completely different issue. Because we're not just going to install it on the browser level. No, there are variances, but in most cases, for example, Android and iOS, quite different. No? We're going to use Burp, no? Very important. I have not done a mobile pen test with a different proxy. Burp yung pinaka-familiar ako. And I'm not sure if others have done it, no? But Burp is the most used. As I've said, intercepting would be very important because how can we see the call to the backend server from the application? So, what's the problem? Well, the problem is SSL pinning. Way SSL pinning is deployed, a lot of ways to do this. By default, for example, Android 9 yata. I mean, you can just modify a file, no, to remove SSL pinning. However, there are some off-the-shelf tools, no. I mean, what I meant is there are custom implementations that will not just allow you to use a certain tool to bypass. No? Tools like SSL kill switch, no, you can only install this in jailbroken devices if I remember correctly. Objection or FIDA, you can use it to bypass SSL pinning. But again, if you haven't jailbroken the device, you have no full control. You can use custom FIDA scripts, but if you've seen a FIDA script, no, you might close your browser. And Facebook na lang, no? At least that's what I feel, no? And so Android, custom FIDA scripts, or even use objection. Now, yung SSL kill switch 2, it's actually an application UI. You just enable it and it will work. No? But in some custom applications where SSL pinning is custom implemented, it won't work most of the time. So mobile pen testing, I'm sorry, I forgot a thing here, no? How actually SSL pinning works. I forgot to mention. You actually pin a certificate, no, so that the application will only talk to servers having that certificate, or having that info from the certificate. So what you're going to do is remove that so that the application does not check for it. Yun lang yun. Yun ang technical point na SSL pinning. Removing it though, if you're able to bypass and remove SSL pinning, then you're going to be able to proxy traffic from your application through your web proxy, then go to the backend server. So any call that you send, or request that you send, is the response that you receive, you're able to see it. So you're going to see the API, is it sent by JSON, is it by a typical XML request. You would be able to see that. No. I won't cover most of it, no, because from my experience, like every time you're going to bypass SSL pinning, is going to be a different story. No? Sometimes it will just work, sometimes you delete the certificate, sometimes you if you delete the certificate, it works, sometimes you have to recompile. I mean, what I would recommend is you have a 5-day test, for example. You dedicate 1 day just to test everything. No? Don't include this, kaya ko yung 3 days. I mean, it's going to be difficult because I've experienced where I can't really just bypass it. And I have to ask for help. And then of course they're busy, then you're going to be delayed with your project. So just give at least the very least 1 day test. In cases that it doesn't work, you can just bypass. You can just ask for the application without pinning. Or if you, for example, encounter application with too much obfuscation, you can just ask for the bare bone without obfuscation. They'll say, you're not really that good. Well, okay, I can do this 5 days now, but what you'll get is a bypass for SSLPD. So, you ask them, I mean, same story, they're going to pay the same money anyway. So, it's up to them. So, mobile pen testing, how do you keep up? Me personally, I keep up by watching keynotes of quotes and watching security updates or vlogs in some Telegram channels. That's the only way I keep up. I don't do this like every day I wake up, I'm going to do research mobile. I can't just do that anymore. No. What you can do is just look at current news, then be updated on these skills. Because as I've mentioned, when you do static analysis, it's dynamic, you do mobile pen testing, you intercept traffic. Technically, you're almost doing web, you're almost doing API. Then if you do source code review, then you're technically covered static already. Right? If you're doing source code review. So network penetration testing would be good for you to understand networks, how they forward traffic, application, wireless pen testing would be good as well. But a key skill would be reverse engineering. Being able to understand how you can decompile an APK, what is a SMALI, ano yung SMALI, how can you resign, jar signer, APK2, all of those things will be very important to start with mobile pen testing. Be ready for a lot of research because as I've said, there are a lot of terms here that are applicable only to iOS and others, and not with others. Okay, so what I recommend, grab an APK on the internet, just test it in such a way na keep your boundaries. I mean, if you see the holes, don't scan it. You can just create your own. If you want, you can create your own application, build it, and then download and try to access it. Or there you can do practice applications. You do CDFs, and also point now is just you can grab an application most likely with Android, but just don't freaking scan. I mean, don't freaking scan the backend server. With your own home IP. No? So please don't. So, okay, so thank you for listening. No, come visit us there at Teaming Village. We're at the back now. But this is 101 Village. No, but plug ko is at Teaming Village. If you want to connect, use my LinkedIn. No, I don't use Twitter anymore because Elon Musk practically destroyed Twitter. No, I'm wondering what's the next project he will destroy. No, but let's keep on. Right, so any questions?
May you recommend the courses, trainings, or labs ba kayo for mobile?
Good question. Very good question. Ganto. From my experience, no, with mobile pen testing, very limited ang courses that you can actually get certification, training. The best would be just to do your own research. No? But if that's not possible, like for example, for me, I can research on something, but it would take so much time, and I'm not even sure if what I'm going to is correct. No, so you would want sometimes instructor-led training. E-Learn offers one, EMAP. No, though personally I have not taken it. No, I have friends or LinkedIn connections who have taken it. I'm not sure what their feedback is. Maybe someone here in the room has taken it, but me personally, no. Okay naman.
So, yung website niya parang will create your own malware application na...
Ayun. So, you can do that. For example, you can check out E-Learn security. Problem though, personally, medyo, hindi ko rin ginagawa ni E-Learn. Parang the platform is like, I'm not sure. Another option, a prices option, would be to take a SaaS. They're going to sell your house. You're going to sell your house, then you go back to your wife or your mom. No? I have 6 books containing SaaS content. But the best, I would say, would take 5-7 seconds. The instructor there is like mobile expert around the EMEA. He's a contributor sa MESPS. So if you have the money and the cash, your organization has the cash. You can explore that. Right? So, yun ang ma-recommend ko. I'm not sure if there are others. My point was with the trainings, you can usually get a lot from other, even from vendors, you can get. But depends on your objective. You want to push your career more, you just want to learn something, and of course your budget. So, Right, so no more questions? Thank you for coming to the talk and see you.